Welcome to MadMarketingTV. My name is Jeff Ogden, the host of the show, and we're really excited about today's guest. I've known this man for a very long time, and he does great stuff in B2B demand generation. So let's introduce Dan McDade. Dan founded the company PointClear in 1997 to provide the best prospect development services to business companies that have complex sales processes. So those are a lot of companies out there. And we're going to talk about the 4 keys to success: the market, the media, the message, and the metrics, the 4 M's. So let's welcome Dan to the show.
Hey, Jeff, how are you doing? Hey, good to see you again. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. I've been wanting to have you on the show for some time. And like I said, you do some great work. And I read this book that you wrote, which I enjoyed a lot, so I appreciate that. So, and I would recommend all our folks on the show, buy this book and read it. It's a pretty thin book, so it's not a long read.
Most people say they love it because it's an airplane read. So.
Yeah, I think it really is an airplane read. Yeah. So anyway, welcome to the show, and let's start talking about some. I know you've worked with a lot of companies on their demand generation program. So, Dan, what do you say is the #1 problem impacting revenue generation in companies today?
Well, I think a lot of people refer to this as alignment, and I really rather refer to it as accountability. And I think that most folks on both the marketing and the sales side of the house would probably agree that there's somewhat a lack of accountability. Now, most of the time they're going to say the lack of accountability actually applies to the other department. But the reality is that there is a definite lack of accountability in terms of the quality of opportunities that marketing is turning over to sales. And there's also a lack of accountability from sales standpoint in feeding back information to marketing. So what you end up with is the same finger-pointing exercise that you and I have talked about and heard about for years between marketing and sales, and that's marketing saying, I give sales leads and they don't follow up on them. And then sales, on the other hand, is saying, I get all these leads from marketing and they're really not high quality. And as a result, they follow up on, generally it's about 6% of all of the leads that are turned over to them. And as a result, there's a tremendous amount of money wasted from a marketing expense standpoint, and there's also some time wasted on the sales side of the house because they're following up on kind of low-level, poor-quality leads. So I think accountability is probably the key word for how you fix the revenue generation problem in most companies today.
Those are some pretty damning statistics, Dan, that, only about 6% of leads get followed up. In fact, I saw some data, I think it was from Marketing Sherpa, that 3 out of 4 leads given to salespeople are totally unqualified. That's pretty scary. And I think that really ties into some of the things you've said about sales really needs fewer leads. Why is it that you believe that sales actually needs fewer rather than more leads?
Well, the problem you have right now, Jeff, is that sales has been conditioned to expect poor quality leads for marketing. And as a result, there's very little ROI. And every year what happens is that marketing's quota is increased, their budgets are cut, so they're spending less per lead. And year after year, there's this kind of spiraling decline in the quality of leads that are being turned over to sales. And as a result, maybe when they're in their rookie year and they were following up on everything they could get their hands on, they followed up on every lead. But what they found was that a large percentage of those leads weren't qualified. As a matter of fact, there's an organization called the Bridge Group that did some research here in the last year. It was actually a really good sample size as well, and they said that just 7% of field salespeople feel that 75% or greater of the leads that they receive are actually fully qualified. So really what needs to happen is that there needs to be an additional level of qualification that's provided on leads before they're turned over to sales, so that you have the sales force focusing on only the best leads. And another important element of that is to make sure that the sales team has the opportunity to pass leads back into some function. And candidly, this function may or may not be part of marketing or sales. It may be a function in between marketing and sales that takes care of the qualification and the nurturing of opportunities. So the bottom line is that you ask any salesperson, they would like to have more high quality leads, but the reality is they're probably getting a lot of leads right now that really aren't worth following up on. And in the end, what they really need is many fewer higher quality opportunities.
I think that's apt advice, Dan, that companies need to be much more selective at leads they hand over to sales and start focusing on quality rather than quantity. Now, going back to this book that you wrote, The Truth About Leads, you have a lot of insights and ideas and things in there that you talked about. Can you give us another idea that came out of the book?
Sure, and this might be a good idea or a good time to show the audience a little bit about the book, or show the cover of the book, as well as provide some free resources. If you go to our website, which is PointClear.com, go to the resources section and then click on white papers, you're going to see a number of free articles that you can download from the website. That includes information about segmentation. It actually includes a white paper that's called Why Your Salesforce Needs Fewer Leads. And it also has some information about the value of long-term leads. And ideally, you'll go out to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and actually pick up the book, which is available hard copy as well as electronically as an ebook. So, but there are a lot of free resources on our website that you can take advantage of. I think the other thing that I would point out from the book that's critically important is the value of long-term leads. A lot of times companies run marketing programs, and both marketing and sales are very, very focused on the short-term opportunities that come out of that effort, and they pretty much ignore the long-term opportunities. It's pretty easy to understand why sales ignores them, because basically salespeople do what you pay them to do, not what you want them to do. So if you turn over leads that are too far out to sales, the chances are higher that they're going to be ignored than they actually will be effectively followed up. So what you need is a function to go in and take care of nurturing and processing those longer-term leads for several months or even for as much as a year prior to them being turned over to sales. And one of the things that I tell folks is that for about maybe as little as 1/10 of the total expense, you can generate as many deals or as many dollars of revenue from the longer-term leads as compared to the shorter-term leads. And again, you can compare this to making a movie. What's left on the cutting room floor. Well, what's left on the cutting room floor in a lot of companies that are marketing and selling, particularly in the B2B environment, is longer-term opportunities that marketing didn't have the budget to follow up on, and sales didn't really have the time or inclination to follow up on. And as a result, identifying those opportunities again 3 or 4 months later becomes extremely expensive. And oh, by the way, the longer-term opportunities typically are better opportunities for sales to work, because instead of being column fodder or getting into an evaluation too late, they actually can get it, and then it can, to some extent, either dictate the terms of the evaluation and win the business in advance, or they can at least be assured of being shortlisted into maybe just the final few companies. So the value of long-term leads is extremely important, and it's something that's often just forgotten and wasted in companies.
Thanks, Dan. I think you make a great point there. In fact, a CMO I know once said to me famously, not that long ago, that marketing looks for Mr. Right and sales looks for Mr. Right now. So sales looks
and before they look,
why can I go sell it? Yeah.
Yeah, and before they look for Mr. Right now, they first look for Mr. Wrong, because they're famous for disqualifying instead of qualifying. So before they get to Mr. Right, they disqualify a lot of princes probably.
Sure. Now, one thing I always ask our guests on the show, and I'll ask you, if there's one thing you want the viewers to remember from our conversation today, a takeaway, what would that be?
Well, probably I would go back to our discussion about accountability, and I can kind of tie that into what I call the 4 M's, which are the metrics, the media, the market, the media, the message, and the metrics. And I know we don't have time to do a deep dive into this today, but typically, as far as the market is concerned, companies broadcast or companies sell too broadly, and they need to really refine that marketplace. From a media standpoint, we always talk about multiple media, so single media campaigns just don't work, or one-and-done campaigns don't work. From a message standpoint, it's taking a look at the offer components, and basically right now, a lot of talk about content, but how do you make the offer relevant to the end user as opposed to just feature rich or even some benefits, but it's not really speaking to the audience. And then finally, metrics, all of the metrics through the process. What percentage of the target audience are becoming leads? What percentage of those are being sales accepted? What percentage of those are sales qualified? What percentage of those close? And basically measuring all of those metrics along that process is critically important, because you could increase revenue up to 5 times by carefully measuring that whole process, and many companies basically don't get that benefit because they don't do that measurement.
Some good tips there, and hopefully on our second part of the show, the after party, we can get into a little more detail on it. So Dan, you're the CEO of the company PointClear. How can people on the call learn more about you and your company?
Well, several ways. You can pick up the phone and call me. My telephone number is on this slide, 678-533-2722. Feel free to send me an email, dan.mcdade@pointclear.com. Or we have 2 Twitter accounts. One is @DanDade, and the second one is @PointClearPD, which stands for Prospect Development. And then I have a pretty active LinkedIn presence, so feel free to look me up in LinkedIn and ask any questions that you have. We'd appreciate your interest, and please do reach out and let me know how I can help you.
Dan, thank you. Some great stuff there, and I appreciate you pointing out how people can learn about PointClear, follow you on Twitter, send you an email, call you, check out Dan and the stuff, and also go to Amazon and pick this book, The Truth About Leads. We'll see you next time on Mad Marketing TV.